instead of awarding contracts that were not implemented.
But is that enough for Ogoniland, and who will do most for human rights when it comes to multinational oil contracts, let alone the use of Nigeria for NATO nation militarism in West Africa? Joining me now is a Nigerian politician who is culture minister and aviation minister. He was an advisor in President Obasanjo's PDP government, and he supports Obasanjo's former vice president, Atiku Abubakar, over incumbent President Buhari in today's elections. Fani Kayode is in the capital, Abuja. Thanks so much, Femi, for coming on. We had the former Nigerian central bank official, Kingsley Moghalu, on the show. He's supported by the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka. He said that Nigeria needed a different kind of politics. Why are you supporting the PDP and Atiku Abubakar?
Well, first of all, I think that the suggestion that anybody other than Atiku Abubakar can defeat the incumbent is unrealistic. I mean, the reality is that the only person that has the opportunity, the chance of defeating Buhari is Atiku Abubakar. And quite apart from that, I think he's an excellent candidate, a good choice, somebody that has immense experience, and somebody that is more than likely will be able to bring the country back together again.
Obviously, Abubakar, a U.S. Senate report, accuses him of transferring $40 million of suspect funds to the U.S. using his American wife's account.
Well, the issue for me is very simple. He hasn't been indicted. He hasn't been convicted. These are allegations that have been made, and until he's indicted, I really don't take them seriously. In any case, he was in America recently. If it was something that was that serious, why on earth wasn't he arrested? He is our leader in our party. He's running for election. We are supporting him. We're supporting the party. We have a major crisis in our country. We have to pull our country back from the brink. We're on the edge of what I would call a disaster, civil disorder, and possibly a civil war somewhere down the line if we're not careful. And we need somebody that can bring us back together again. And that, for me, is the overriding consideration, and that's why I'm supporting Atiku Abubakar.
Well, in London, obviously, we had pictures here of Theresa May with Buhari signing security deals, arms training deals. Obviously, Obama famously pictured with Buhari. Do you think the West has any chosen candidate?
It's a very, very complicated question. Simple on the surface, but complicated below. If you go back, 2015, I was very much involved in the presidential campaign then. I was spokesman for our then presidential candidate, President Goodluck Jonathan, who was president at the time. And it was very clear to us that Britain, the United States, and France particularly, and most of the Western nations were supporting Buhari, and they wanted Jonathan out of power. Obama spearheaded that, and Obama ensured that, and indeed told some of our government officials at the time that they would get Jonathan out at all costs. France was also, I believe it was Hollande that was the president at the time, and of course David Cameron in the United Kingdom. They all supported Buhari. They all wanted Jonathan out of power. But the problem is they really didn't know what they were getting into, and we warned them that this man is divisive. He's a Muslim fundamentalist. He seeks to impose Islam on the rest of the country. He's a believer in. He has an ethnic agenda, the Fulanization of the country. He's immensely unfit, both mentally, physically, and spiritually, to lead a country like this, because he sees everything from a prism of religion and everything from a prism of tribe. And we told them that. They didn't listen to us. They supported him. He became president of the country. And he's, you know, all we said over the last 3.5, at that time, has been proved over the last 3 years and 6 months. Now we are where we are today. And I would put it to you that I believe that the West has learned their lesson about Buhari. They've seen the carnage. They've seen the genocide. They've seen the ethnic cleansing. They've seen the persecution of political opponents. They've seen the wholesale destruction of our economy, the reduction of our people to poverty-stricken, pauperized people. We're now the world's poverty capital. I mean, every single aspect of our economy and our nation has been destroyed over that period. And they have recognized the fact, something we told them years ago, that a man like this will only encourage terrorism. He has supported Boko Haram by paying huge ransoms. Boko Haram is on the rampage. They are more powerful today than they were 4 years ago. The Fulani herdsmen terrorist organization of their own. He has never, ever condemned them, even though they have slaughtered more people than probably Boko Haram over the last 3.5 years. We also have ISIS in Nigeria now as a consequence of his espousal of fundamental Islamic doctrines. And we also have another group called the Malian Fulanis who are coming in to the northwestern part of the country, slaughtering our people in the north. That is the legacy of Buhari. And I think they've seen all that. That is, the Western leaders have seen all that and probably changed their minds and realized that we were right to have said they should keep this man out of power. And now they're probably looking at it from a different perspective. And it's very clear, because what they're saying now is they want a free and fair election. And they're saying this in the knowledge that Buhari will attempt to stay in power at all costs.
Okay, well, Buhari, obviously, and his cabinet and his politicians would no doubt deny a lot of those accusations and allegations you just made.
If I may just make a quick comparison here, because the challenges of Nigeria, our problems are not limited to just having another election and another president. It's a far more fundamental problem than that. And look at what happened in Syria. Look at what's happening in most of the Arab world. Look at what's happening in Libya. If we are not careful, we'll have something similar happening in this country, simply because you have a massive Christian population here, a massive Muslim population who are badly divided. And so it's a reality that thousands of people have been slaughtered over the last 3.5 years. Nobody can deny that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Syria, because, of course, as you say, many different communities. But as for your candidate, he says, unless we dismantle mafia organizations, we cannot progress. Let's privatize them. Is your chosen candidate, Abu Bakr, basically, in a way, a bit like Bashar al-Assad before the war in Syria, wants to privatize everything, wants to bring in Western oil companies to, as his detractors would put it, just remove all the money from Nigeria and send it abroad?
Well, I think that's an oversimplification of what he's attempting to do. And again, I must emphasize, I am not his spokesperson. I do not speak for him. I'm not in his campaign organization. But I am a party member, and I'm a Nigerian. And I think that the road of privatization is a pretty good one. The record speaks for itself. The whole world is privatizing now. If not for the fact that, Russia privatized, and of course they went through a number of challenges after the Soviet Union fell, but they privatized, and now they are what they are today, a relatively powerful country that's on the rise throughout the world. That is the road, that is the way forward. So I think to that extent, it's a pretty good policy. I also believe this, that a country where government is so powerful and government is controlling enterprises like the NNPC and so on and so forth are bound to have challenges, because that's where corruption comes in, and that's why everybody's so interested in taking power at the center, because that's where all the money is, that's where all the assets are controlled by government. We should move away from that. Smaller government, more efficient system, and a booming economy. That's what we're trying to achieve, and that's what he wants to do.
You mentioned Russia. You know about the accusations that your chosen candidate, Abu Bakr, is connected to the Russians. He's hired the Donald Trump lobbyist Brian Ballard. Nonsense, those allegations?
Well, I don't know who he's close to or who he's not close to, but what I will tell you is this. If you say he's close to the Russians, he's equally close to the Americans, he's equally close to the British, he's equally close to the European Union and everybody else. And I don't think it's a crime, or there's a crime in being close to the Russians. I admire the Russians. I like the Russians. I like the role they played in Syria. I like the fact that they supported and defended secularist governments and Christian communities, and even Shia minorities in Sunni Muslim countries, where Salafists and Wahhabists were funded by Saudi Arabia and, to a certain extent, the Obama regime to slaughter these people like flies. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being close to the Russians. I don't know whether he is close to the Russians, and I wouldn't for 1 minute suggest that he's in the pocket of the Russians. There's a complete difference between the two, but I don't think being close to the Russians is such a bad thing. I think it's good to be close to everybody, to talk to everybody. And I also believe that Russia should play a much bigger role in the affairs of Nigeria and indeed Africa.
Well, that'll raise a few eyebrows in NATO headquarters, let alone the EU. I've got to ask, you've presumably heard about the governor of Kaduna saying foreign intervention by the UK, EU and US in the election means that people will from those places will be returning in body bags today if that happens. I've got to just ask, because you did suggest that Buhari will rig the election. EU officials are, of course, there on the ground today.
Listen, it's very important that you understand the mindset of the people that we're dealing with. And I would suggest to you, I'll put it to you, that mindset is very close, very, very close to the mindset of the sort of people that were leading Al-Qaeda, that were leading ISIL, and that were leading various other terrorist organizations in the Arab world. When somebody like Nasser al-Rufai, somebody that I was very close to, we were in cabinet together for a number of years, the governor of Kaduna State talks about body bags for interfering. And what he means by interfering is calling, to question the partiality of or the impartiality of INEC and the government in the conducting of this election. In other words, he doesn't want anybody to question anything. When he says that, you need to take him very, very seriously, because that's their mindset. This gentleman, in his state in 2016, 808 Christians were killed.
There is a piece of code the PDP
the issue
signed.
is this: when he talks about body bags, take him very seriously, and we hope and pray that they don't go that far in their quest to stay in power. We sincerely hope that it doesn't come to that, but they're prepared to do anything, fight anybody, kill anybody, stop anybody, criminalize anybody, demonize anybody, including the West, in order to ensure that they stay in power. And by God's grace, they will fail in that quest.
Fani Kayode, thank you. After the break. As China rejects NATO nation mainstream media reports of talks with EU-US backed